In 1978, pilot Barry is bored during a flight. Since his coworker is sleeping, Barry turns off the autopilot and makes the plane shake, waking up all the passengers. He quickly puts the plane back on normal and pretends it was just turbulence. When Barry comes home from work, his wife Lucy is waiting with cute naughty clothes so they can get busy, but Barry immediately falls asleep. One day while Barry is having a break at a bar between flights, he's approached by Monty, who knows Barry's secret. It turns out he's been smuggling cigars to make extra money. Monty is a CIA agent who thinks Barry's profile is interesting because he's had plenty of important achievements, so he wants Barry to help the country. The agent takes Barry to a secret hangar to show him an extremely fast aircraft that Barry could fly if he takes the job. The missions would consist of doing reconnaissance over Central America, but Barry wouldn't be allowed to tell anyone about it, not even his wife. Barry doesn't like the idea of keeping secrets from Lucy but agrees to do it anyway. Then Monty lets Barry take the plane out for a spin and admires his perfect control as he pulls off some impressive tricks. Barry is having fun flying like he hasn't in many years. Later at home, Barry tells Lucy that he's leaving the commercial airline to join a private company called Independent Aviation Consultants, which is the name Monty gave him as a cover. An argument ensues because Lucy thinks it sounds like a scam and he's making a big mistake. Barry wonders if she's right, but during his next commercial flight, he immediately gets bored and leaves the plane without a word. Afterward, Barry quits his regular job and starts doing the missions for Monty. Because of the Cold War, the Soviets are backing communist insurgents in Central America, and the CIA wants pictures of their activities. Barry flies the CIA's plane over various countries and goes pretty low to take extremely detailed photos. This often means the insurgents open fire at him, but he's such a great pilot that he always gets to escape without getting hurt. It's very dangerous, but he finds his new job very exciting. His pictures are so good that Monty gets praised at the office all the time for the intel he's acquired. One day a bullet actually hits the plane and Barry almost crashes, but he changes a few things in the controls and quickly gets to fly off safely. Thanks to this new job, Barry gets to be home more and actually gives pleasure to Lucy. Eventually they even have kids. However, Barry hasn't told his family that he's changed jobs and he puts on his old uniform every time he goes home. Another problem is that Barry isn't being paid well. Monty always showers him with compliments, so Barry asks for a raise, yet Monty says he has to wait. Sometime later, Barry is given a new mission which he calls Bag Man. He has to stop at Panama and exchange packages with Colonel Noriega, who has been selling intel to the CIA. One day Barry lands in Colombia to refuel when suddenly some men surround him and take him away in their car. Moments later, Barry is in the office of famous narco-terrorist Pablo Escobar, who knows that Barry isn't the businessman he's pretending to be. Pablo takes Barry on a tour through his plantation and offers to pay him big money if he agrees to smuggle their illegal powder. Barry likes the idea, but he notices a crashed plane in the trees. It turns out the plantation runway is too short and that caused the death of several pilots. However, Pablo refuses to make it bigger because it would be seen by the army, and he tells Barry that if he can't do it, then he can just leave. Barry takes this as an insult to his skills and accepts the job as it is. Then Pablo tells Barry he has to land in Miami to deliver the goods. Barry thinks that's too dangerous and proposes to drop the stuff in Louisiana by using a special hatch in the plane. The dealers will just have to be there to pick it up. He teaches the workers how to wrap the packages to protect them from the fall and has to stop them from overloading the plane. He may still have room, but too much weight wouldn't allow him to fly. After pushing the plane as far into the runway as possible, Barry finds a guy in the cockpit. The workers want him to take a guard for the product, but Barry refuses, having to explain the weight issue again. Before he leaves, he's given a cross for protection and he hangs it on the dashboard. Pablo and his men start a bet to see if Barry will survive the experience. The plane isn't happy about all the weight and struggles for a couple of miles through the trees, but eventually it takes off successfully and Barry kisses the cross. In the US airspace, the military radar picks up the plane. However, Barry's been expecting this and he flies around the oil platforms, so the military thinks he's one of the company helicopters. Once he reaches Louisiana, Barry puts the plane on autopilot, opens the hatch, and drops the packages for the men waiting on the ground. Later, Barry celebrates with Pablo, who pays him with a bag of cash and already starts discussing the next delivery. At that moment, a bunch of soldiers surround the house and open fire, so Barry panics. However, Pablo and the men tell him not to worry and leave the room. Barry doesn't know what to do and gets more scared when he sees a police helicopter. He grabs his bag of money and tries to run, only to find a shootout in the corridors. A soldier arrests him while the others surround Pablo's group in the lobby. A few days later, Pablo and his friends are released, but Barry is still in jail and missing a tooth. Monty comes to see him and informs him that the police know he's a smuggler, so his house will be searched tomorrow. Barry doesn't want to get his family in trouble and asks Monty for help. The agent agrees to help Barry, but in return he'll have to deliver weapons to some rebels in Nicaragua since the new president has a plan for the war. A desperate Barry has no choice but to take the deal. Moments later, Barry is out of jail, but Monty couldn't make the search order disappear. To protect his family, Barry can move to a place arranged by the CIA in Arkansas. Barry arrives home at 4 a.m. and wakes his family up to urge them to pack their things. Lucy is confused and asks for an explanation, but Barry just asks her to trust him. They grab their things pretty quickly and leave the house right before the police arrive. In Arkansas, the family isn't happy to see a boring, small town with almost no people. The house is in the woods and needs lots of repairs. Monty is waiting in the forest, so Barry leaves without an explanation and Lucy starts to get suspicious. The duo makes it to a private airport and Monty reveals that the whole area from the house to this place belongs to Barry now. Then Monty shows him the weapons he'll have to deliver and a map to avoid all the army bases. The flying area will be small, so it's pretty dangerous. However, Barry is excited about owning his own airport and notices the bag of cash waiting for him, so he's happy to take the job. When Barry gets home, Lucy furiously jumps on him and he has no choice but to confess everything. He drops all the money to assure her she can buy all the things she wants to take care of their family, but she's still worried. In 1981, Barry makes his first delivery. However, the locals aren't interested in guns. Instead, they steal his fancy clothes and sunglasses. When he calls Monty to complain, Monty says Barry must deliver the goods to the right place at the right time. It turns out Barry isn't making deliveries for soldiers. His mission is to get civilians to fight. For his next trip, Barry comes out with a bat for self-defense and brings out nicer gifts first, like naughty magazines and alcohol. At that moment he's found by Pablo and his men, who want him to smuggle for them again. Since now Barry has the CIA's control map, he's happy to accept. Barry starts making multiple deliveries with a simple plan. He picks up the guns in Arkansas, avoids all law enforcement, thanks to the map, and lands on Pablo's headquarters. The Colombians keep most of the guns and load the plane up with their product, which Barry then takes to the training camp. There the powder product is put on boats that sail it to Miami. Barry also gets bags of powder that he takes to the state after a stop for fuel in Panama, where he's protected by Noriega. The colonel gets some happy powder in payment too. When Barry returns to Louisiana, he dumps the rest of the bags in the swamps for the dealers to collect. Barry starts making a lot of money with this side job and the operation gets so big that he hires help. These 4 men have experience in illegal activities and Barry nicknames them his snowbirds. All of them fly separately for maximum profit. One day Monty approaches Barry with huge news. The US government wants to bring the insurgents to Barry's land to train them. Soon all of Barry's planes are bringing people over and those rebels are happy to leave their poor neighborhoods because they believe the fake promises of the American dream. Every time Barry lands in Latin America, the locals surround him and beg him to take them. Soon an entire training base is set up in Arkansas and the young men are trained in firearms. Barry continues to take pictures and deliver both guns and powder as well. Some people in town are starting to get suspicious, but Barry's doing lots of projects that keep everyone happy, so they're willing to look the other way. By 1982, Barry has bought a new car and renovated the entire house, but he still has too much money and he can only deposit a small amount in the bank without giving away his illegal business. To deal with this, he sets up a bunch of companies in town and creates silly jobs for the locals. Eventually he even buys new planes for his airport. Lucy likes the new fancy life they're living and starts going with Barry to the parties thrown by Pablo. One night the couple even gets dirty while Barry is flying the plane. The money still keeps coming and is starting to pile up around the house, so Barry's solution is to bury it in the backyard. One day Lucy's brother JB comes to see the family and explains he's unemployed, so Barry allows him to become the cleaning boy for the airport. During this time, the money keeps piling up and there's no more room in the backyard. The dog digs out a bag by mistake and JB ends up finding some bags too. When Barry opens the barn door, the bags of money fall on top of him. He ends up dropping the cash in the barn among the horse's hay. That afternoon JB comes home with a new car and a girlfriend who appears to be a minor. Lucy immediately takes the girl away and Barry scolds JB for spending money recklessly. In 1983, Barry's crew is tired after a long day of work. That night they aren't careful enough during their trip home and the planes are finally detected by the government's radars. The army jets start following the team and Barry knows they can't outspeed them because those jets have the fastest technology. Instead he tells his team to slow down and circle over the ocean for the rest of the night. Eventually the jets run out of fuel and have no choice but to turn back. Sometime later the FBI notices that a little town in Arkansas is producing way too much money. An agent visits the place and notices there are too many banks, not to mention the luxury cars on the street. Meanwhile Border Patrol also finds Barry's planes and sends out their own. They learned from last time and now they send normal planes that keep up with Barry's models. Unable to lose them, Barry decides to make a sudden turn and lands in the middle of a street. A car has to drive off the road to avoid a crash and the plane destroys various signs as it continues to move. It ends up crashing into trees in someone's backyard before it finally stops. Without hesitation, Barry grabs his bag of money, drops some cash for the people living there, and takes a kid's bicycle to escape. In the meantime Pablo declares war on the government and his group is kicked out of Colombia, so they settle down in Nicaragua. Barry immediately leaves to meet him, so JB takes the chance to steal a bag of money and goes to town. The sheriff sees him and immediately chases after him to arrest him on the street and soon the FBI agent follows them. Lucy calls Barry to warn him but he can't leave until he finishes a new deal with Pablo, which will be even more dangerous. Once he gets home, Barry calls JB in jail and tells him not to talk because he'll take care of everything. Then Barry calls Pablo and tells him he must pause business until he's done dealing with the JB issue, but Pablo promises he'll solve it. A few hours later, JB is out of jail. Barry takes him to the middle of the road and gives him a bunch of money plus a passport, asking him to disappear from his life. A furious JB yells at Barry, insulting Lucy as he gets in his car. Barry comes out to defend Lucy but freezes when he sees the vehicle exploding. Obviously JB is now dead, so Barry pushes the wreckage into the woods to hide everything. Sometime later Monty is scolded by his superiors because half of the weapons sent to Nicaragua ended up in the hands of traffickers instead of rebels. Monty visits Barry to cancel the entire operation and sends all the rebels home. He tells Barry to wait for a new call, but it's clear that the CIA is done with him. When Monty returns to the office, he orders his men to burn every document related to Barry. At the same time Barry tells the snowbirds to pack their things and run, although they don't know what to do with all the guns. That night the airport is suddenly surrounded by several law enforcement agencies, from the FBI to the federal police. Barry is arrested and he asks for his right to a phone call, but when he tries to call Pablo, the number isn't valid. Dozens of officers surround Barry while he talks to the prosecutor, whose speech is interrupted by a call from the governor. The officers stare in disbelief when the prosecutor then announces that Barry is free to go. As soon as he steps outside, Barry is picked up by a bunch of men in suits who fly him to the White House. He attends a meeting with some of the most important men in the military, who are desperate to prove that Latin America is behind all the trafficking and to catch Pablo. They want Barry to keep smuggling for Pablo as a double agent and gather the evidence they need. Barry obviously takes the job. In 1984, the government gives Barry a new plane and shows him where all the cameras are hidden. All he has to do is take pictures. Barry is worried because he thinks the cameras are too obvious, but he can't back out now because it means jail. Barry and one of the snowbirds leave on the new plane and fly through a storm to make it to Nicaragua. As soon as they land, they're surrounded by angry soldiers who make the duo drop to their knees. Soon Pablo's assistant arrives and orders his men to shoot the gringos, only to start laughing. It turns out it's just a prank. Then Barry checks on Pablo and things are tense at first, but Barry convinces him that they're still friends. The delivery continues as usual and they get to take all the needed pictures. Sometime later the government makes an official announcement on television about winning the war against smugglers. They put the pictures on the screen as proof, but they don't blur Barry's face, which makes Lucy furious. At the same time Pablo and his team learn of Barry's betrayal. Barry calls a government official to ask for help and the man apologizes for publishing the pictures by mistake, but he also says that Barry knew the risks. That day, Barry has a final dinner with his family and tells Lucy to put on all her expensive jewelry before the feds arrive so they can't take it from her. Soon the house is full of agents taking away all the money and valuables. Barry watches while telling Lucy to leave with the kids but without him so they'll be safe. Lucy refuses and starts taking off all the jewelry. A desperate Barry calms her down and reminds her he'll be in prison for a while, so she finally agrees to flee. While Lucy and the kids move to her hometown, Barry is put on trial. The prosecutor tries to destroy him, but the judge only sentences him to 1,000 hours of community service. Barry simply walks away while the prosecutor continues to protest. Knowing that Pablo is coming for him, Barry starts to sleep in a different motel every night. In the process, he records a bunch of videos narrating his whole story. Every time he starts his car, he asks people in the area to step back because he's scared it may explode. In the evenings, he has to show up at a Salvation Army house to do his community service. One night when he parks his car, mysterious men surround him and shoot him in the head. The police find the body in the morning but the FBI takes over the investigation to cover it all up. One of the snowbirds is arrested but eventually he becomes a rural pastor in Alabama. The snowbird's whereabouts are unknown. Monty is promoted when he proposes to his bosses to get the Iranians to arm Latin America. The CIA continues to use Barry's planes to arm the rebels, but they don't know how to handle the weight and the operation is cancelled when they get shot down. Lucy works at a fast food restaurant, however she still has some of the fancy jewelry. This is based on a real story, and this incident is what sparked the Iran-Contra scandal. The real Barry was shot in his car on February 19, 1986 at age 46.